Well, here we go. We're about to make it. Okay, here's the recipe. Potato refrigerated rolls. So we're gonna start by getting our mashed potatoes made. We're gonna need 1 cup of lukewarm mashed potatoes. We're gonna need to save the water because we're gonna use the potato water for the 1.5 cups warm water. Now the key to the mashed potatoes is, we'll make them, but we're gonna make enough mashed potatoes, there'll be a little left over so you can make potato soup to go with the rolls, because you can just stick that in the refrigerator and spice it up the next day for the potato soup. So here we go. We're starting out with some boiling water. I'm not making it as big as I should or could because we're in a bit of a hurry tonight. You can normally do more potatoes. We're gonna peel the potatoes, put them in the water. Do not salt the water. Salt and yeast are enemies, so you've got to use just the right amount of salt so you don't put in unnecessary salt anywhere along the way. So here we've got unsalted water. The potatoes will be peeled, they'll be placed in the water, cut up about the same size for each chunk so they cook evenly. Okay, we've got the 4 potatoes as Gracie finishes peeling the last one. We'll cut them into even squares, and the smaller the square, the quicker they'll cook. So what we've got now is the boiling water. I'm not sure I got enough, but we've got the diced potatoes. And this gives you an idea, they're pretty small, cut pretty small. We're gonna put them in the boiling water. Now we've got the potatoes in the water. We wanna cover them up in the water. So get the water boiling around them. We did not wash the potatoes after we peeled them, because what feels sticky on them is starch. And that starch we want to stay in the water. That starch will feed the yeast. And it's the reason we'll be using potato water instead of simply using plain water. So we've got the water going, we've got the potatoes going, we want them to get soft. While that's cooking and getting soft, we've got the other ingredients that we're gonna be putting into these rolls. We're using King Arthur all-purpose flour. It's got a good gluten-forming protein content of 11.7. Bread flour will make these a little tougher and have trouble in your mixer. A cake flour is too light and doesn't have enough protein to form a gluten. So you want an all-purpose flour. We use active dry yeast. We got this at HEB. You can get it almost anywhere, but this is what you're going to want to use as your yeast because it's the most available. You will use butter instead of Smart Balance, but you want unsalted butter because, again, salt and yeast are enemies, and we've got to control how much salt we use. You want to use some, you don't want to use too much. So we'll be exact with the recipe. We've got plain old sugar, and at that point, we've basically got all the ingredients, as you can see. And so we'll start measuring it out.
5.
Are you filming?
Yeah.
All right, Rebecca, 6. You and Gracie both have a KitchenAid mixer with a dough hook, and that's a good
7.
thing. But I want to tell you that it's going to struggle with this dough because there's so much of it. So you want to go a little light. This is just 7 cups of flour. It calls for 7 to 7.5. And each one was just a smidgen concave, not piled up, because we want to use enough to where we can make it, but not so much that your mixer gets bogged down. So we're just going to set aside that. The water we don't have yet. 2/3 cup sugar. We'll set that aside next, and that's easily made. Here's 1/3 cup. So we'll take 1/3 cup sugar. Let's get another bowl for it. It never hurts just to get all your ingredients out. And I actually am going to tell you a little different way to mix it up than they have in the book. There's 1/3. And there's the second third. So we've got now 2/3 cup sugar. We need 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So let's get a bowl and get the salt. I've put 1.5 teaspoons of salt right here. Now, next it calls for 2/3 cup shortening. So what we're gonna do is do 2/3 cup of butter. So Rebecca, we're using butter and it's 2/3 cup, but that's about 10.6 tablespoons of butter. We've cut it measuring off of the butter package. So here we've got the butter. Now the last thing we've got to do is we've got to do the yeast measurement. Normally you would add 1 package of active dry yeast. This tells you it's got a conversion method to it. It tells you that 2.5 teaspoons equals 1 yeast package. So we want 2.5 teaspoons, and we're not going to put it in the salt container. We want to keep our salt and our yeast separate at this point. So it's 2.5 teaspoons. That's 2.5. Now we've got all of our ingredients, but we're going to need our water before we go any further. So we've checked the potatoes. If you look at the potato, here's one of the large potatoes. I'm going to put it right here and I'm going to mash it. Ooh, it shot out. It didn't mash easy. So they're not ready yet. You want to get to where when you take a fork, you'll mash it really, really good. So we're going to give it another minute. Here's my setup. So we got to capture the water and we want to cool the water down. If water is too hot, if it's over 115 degrees, it kills yeast. So we've got to bring it down. And the way 110 degrees is, think about it, your body's about 98.7. So if it just feels like your body temperature, it's 98.7. It's okay to be a little warm to the touch, but you don't want it hot to the touch. So we got to capture the water and cool it off fairly quickly, but we don't want it too cold. If it's too cold, yeast won't grow. So you just want to try and get it where it's warm to the touch. And so we'll save our potatoes here, and we'll get our water here, and we'll get 1.5 cups of that water and super cool it real quick. All right, we're gonna see if we don't have a little bit better luck. I'm taking a smaller one. The smaller ones obviously cook faster, but that's good. That's a good, you can mash it with a fork and get a good mashed potato out of it. And that's what you want. You want a good mashed potato. The potato water and the potatoes, we're gonna pour it in here. So that saves us the potatoes. And we need to save them. We need 1.5 cups of this water first. So let's measure that out and let's get that in a fridge real quick. So here's 1.5 cups of potato water. We gotta be real careful putting it in glass, but this is tempered glass that doesn't crack from it, I hope. Then we're gonna put the potato water in the freezer just for a few minutes and see if we can't get some get some cooling action for that while we mash our potatoes. So Gracie's mashing up the potatoes and she knows she wants them mashed pretty smooth for this. We've got the 1 cup measurer right here so she can measure out how much she needs by putting it in that 1 cup. When you're measuring ingredients like flour or a solid like mashed potatoes, you want to use a cup like this instead of one of those see-through glass things. The glass things work great for liquids because liquids automatically level, but the potatoes don't. So this is a good mash. We'll put them in the cup measurer in just a minute. Here we've got Gracie's done her mashed potatoes, exactly 1 cup. We've pushed it down so there aren't any air spaces in there, and we know we've got a solid cup scraped across the top. So now we're gonna put ingredients up and get ourselves ready to mix, while our water is still cooling down.
We lightly beat the eggs.
Okay, water's not ready.
Water is not ready yet. But when this says warm water, that's the potato water we're gonna use, not just regular warm water.
Okay, Rebecca, I couldn't find the dough hook to your mom's KitchenAid. You'll use the dough hook and you'll use your bowl. And I wanna tell you how to put the stuff in it and how to turn it on because that actually makes a difference. I've pre-measured the flour in something with soft sides because it's easier to get it in there. But the very first thing you want to do is put the flour in. And so get your flour in there. And once you've got your flour in, before anything else goes in, we can make things differently now than they could back in the day of the cookbook, because yeast has become more refined. So we can just dump the yeast in with the flour itself. We can take the sugar and dump it in. Usually, back in those days, you had to proof your yeast, which means you put the yeast in warm water and let it start fermenting and growing. We don't have to do that anymore. It's the joy of instant dry yeast. So once we've got those in here, what I like to do is mix them up. And you do that simply by keeping your mixer on low and just letting it go around for a little bit. While you're mixing it up, you're gonna add your salt, but you're not gonna add your salt till later. So we can take the liquids and start adding the liquids in just a minute. Getting the liquids here ready. I'm gonna pull the water out of the freezer. Check it one more time. That water is warm to the touch. So it might even be a little bit hot, just to be on the safe side. I'm gonna take the eggs and I'm gonna add them to the water because the eggs are cold. And that'll cool the water off just a little bit more. Gracie, you can feel that water. It's not too hot now.
Okay.
Feels like your skin temperature.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah.
So with that, we're gonna take the water, we're gonna add it to the mixture that we've got. Just dump it in there. We can dump in at this point in time also, drop that down, the potatoes. So just take the potatoes, they're not too hot either. So we're gonna put the potatoes in there. Potatoes make for a really good airy dough. And then we haven't added the butter. That's the last thing we're gonna add. We're gonna start this back up again. We're gonna let the liquids mix in, and we're gonna go ahead and pour in the salt. There's just a little side container. So the salt will now get added. So we've got that happening. And what we want it to do is we wanna mix it on a low setting. You've got on your KitchenAid stir, and then one right above stir. You probably wanna go to the one right above stir until it forms a dough that kind of is coherent. Once it forms a dough, we're gonna turn it up to one more speed, medium on this, but right now we're at speed 1 on this. We don't really have a stir. But once it forms a dough, I'll show you, then we'll turn it up a little bit, and we're gonna add the butter chunk at a time with this really cool rule about how to add the butter. So let's let it form a little dough first. You can see it's all starting to come together now as a dough. And once it does, we'll undo this. But once it's together as a dough, here,
I want to see
you
it.
see how it's kind of a dough.
Okay.
We're gonna let it crank just a little bit longer at 1 until it's all gathered together, because I can still see some of the flour in the bottom. We're gonna turn it up, and we're gonna turn it up, and here's what's gonna happen. We're gonna take the butter and start dropping in the butter. And you're gonna hear it slosh around. The butter will slosh around until it absorbs. And when you don't hear it slosh anymore, you know it's kind of absorbed, and you can put in some more. You just keep adding the butter as it absorbs. Butter actually works to help make the eggs and the sugar and the flour all bind together. Chemically, fat will bind protein and carbs together. And so that's why we're doing it this way. So we just gradually add butter as we mix it. And we're gonna mix it. I'm gonna set the timer. You wanna mix it on medium speed for about 6 minutes. Let me set the timer, and away we go.
alternatives to butter would be Smart Balance, coconut oil.
We've done coconut oil.
And it turned out really great.
When you use Smart Balance, you want to be careful because it's salty. And so you want to take away just about 20% of your salt. To use the coconut shortening, coconut oil that's solid, it's great at it. And it's a great way to do it if you don't want to use butter. But you can look at it inside right now, and you can see that it's just really kneading that dough. And it needs to knead for about 5 or 6 minutes at a good speed. Now, if your mixer is just grimacing and it's having trouble going through it, if you've got water in a spritz bottle, that's best, and you spritz the water in. If you don't have a spritz bottle, just take your fingers and flick water in it. And flecking in the water will allow it to move more smoothly. Time out. Gracie, it's going to town right now. Rebecca, it's just really looking good. It's mixing it. Got about 3 minutes to go. Meanwhile, you've got a couple of these that I've just sent you, and you want to spray it with Pam because that's what's going to hold your bread dough for 6 days or so. All right, Rebecca, we've finished the meat kneading. We've done 6 minutes on medium, having done a couple of minutes on low. And we've got a good dough. And I'm gonna take the dough hook out and take the bowl out, and then we'll put it into this container. I'm gonna get Gracie to film me doing this. Gracie?
Excuse me, adding to my LinkedIn profile. Okay.
All right, so here we've got the dough out now, and it feels like a good dough. It's got a good texture. I like this. We had a little extra butter in there that didn't wind up incorporating because it was up at the top, so I just smeared it into this. I'm gonna turn this dough in here and push it down, but then flip it over. So we've got a smooth top that's got oil on it, got butter on it. We sprayed this with Pam. I'm gonna put the lid on it. And this is now ready to go into the fridge. Now, when you want to cook it, you're going to pull this out, take out the amount that you want, shape it into rolls as per the instructions, and cook them as per the instructions. Or you can roll it out, sprinkle, paint it with melted butter, and then put cinnamon and sugar on it. Roll it up and make your cuts and make cinnamon rolls. You can put raisins in the cinnamon rolls. You can put apple slices in the cinnamon rolls. Peel the apples. All of those are just really, really good adds. They make it pretty, they make it beautiful. If you're making cinnamon rolls, the frosting is easy. It's just powdered sugar with a little bit of vanilla and hot water. But that'll get you going. And at this point, the roll dough goes in the fridge. You can start cooking it the next day. I love y'all. Hope my daughters enjoy this recipe. Bye. So we put it in the fridge because the very first rise of the dough happens in the refrigerator. I told you yeast doesn't like the cold, it doesn't grow as fast. So it will grow more slowly in the fridge. That's why it's okay to put it in there. So we put it in the fridge. It will grow overnight in the fridge, or for 6 days in the fridge. If it winds up getting too big for some reason, you just punch it down and keep it in the fridge. And it'll start growing all over again. But what happens when it grows is the yeast is eating the carbohydrates. It's eating the potato water starch, it's eating the potatoes, it's eating the sugar, it's eating some of the flour. And when it eats it, it emits gas. That's the byproduct. And the gas is pushing up to get out of the dough. But since we kneaded the dough's formed what's called gluten. Think of it like fabric. It's pressed the proteins down on themselves, where they've knitted together. So when the gas happens, the gas can't escape, it just pushes up. And that's what causes the bread to rise. And it's okay to push it back down and let it do it again, but you probably won't need to. Then the next day, you can bring the dough out, or 2 days later, bring the dough out. When you bring the dough out, 2 hours before you need to cook it, you shape the rolls however you want to shape them. Put them on the cookie sheet however you want to do that. and then cover it with a damp cloth because you won't have the lid on it anymore, and you don't want it to turn hard and crusty before you cook it. And so you cover it with a damp cloth, put it in a room temperature, and let it rise. And the dough will still be cold, but it'll warm up to the room temperature, and it'll rise over the next hour and a half after you shape it. Plop it in the oven. It cooks fast because it's a hot oven, and you're there. You know, I like to do things, you know. I like to paint the top with melted butter or Smart Balance after I'm done. I like to sprinkle a little salt on the top. It's great to take if you're making dinner rolls and you've got some the next day. Put some ham inside them. Whatever you may want to do like that. Lots you can do with this. This recipe, you can make cinnamon rolls, make donuts, make anything you want, but they're the best dinner house rolls you'll get. Love you.